They're used to that.
They're used to having you.
Yeah, but it's they get lots of New Yorkers here.
It's a very popular travel spot.
Really, the school, the two lane right next door, it gets ever since the 70s when the Panamanians started sending their kids and they built up the Chabad house, and ever since then it's been quite the one of the biggest Jewish schools, really.
Your school that you went to.
Yeah. Yeah, so it's the same, the Chabad house and for the city is the same as the campus one.
And they're still getting the Sephardim coming there?
At least from Panama, not from New York. They get a Persian kids. Ralph's the only one I know sent a Syrian kid here. But in Panama, they all come here still, I think.
If you could do your homework on that, I'll be interested in knowing about that.
Yeah.
What's happening with the Jewish community on college campus there.
Here it's very strong, probably one of the best. Um, and even more so than when I went here.
Interesting. Well, okay, we are on Vav Amar Aleph, 6a. We started last week. We were identifying, Dalit Rishut 6a 2. We could go back to that. Tana Rabbanan on the first column. The rabbis taught Arba Rishut Shabbat. We said there are four different domains when it comes to the Shabbat. There's something called the Rishut Yachid, something called the private area, something called the Rishut Rabim, a public area. Excuse me, we're very familiar with the private and public, where you can't carry from private to public or public to private, or from right, or for amot, or carry for amot in public itself. Those are two of the four domains. And then there's something called a Carmelite, which we said is a place that's rabbinically prohibited to carry. It's not considered, it's not really a public property. It doesn't meet the requirements of a public property. It doesn't meet the requirements of a private property. It's an in-between type of place. And there's something called a Makom Petur. Makom Petur is an exempt area, which is, in a certain sense, better than a Carmelite, meaning a Carmelite is a type of domain that rabbinically we forbade you from carrying 4 amot, 6 to 8 feet in that domain, or rabbinically you can't carry from a public property into this Carmelite or from private property into this Carmelite. However, a Mokum Ptur is an area where you technically could go directly from public to this exempt area, or this exempt area to public, or private to this exempt area, or vice versa. So that's called a Mokum Ptur. And we're going to have to identify all these places. What are these places? What constitutes, what makes something public? What makes something private? What makes something exempt? What are the measurements of these type of places? We want to say good morning to Asaf, and we want to welcome Simon. Simon is here live at our class. Good to see you, Simon. Simon, we are on 6A2. So now the Gemara identifies these areas that we just mentioned, these different domains, right? That we mentioned. And again, regarding Shabbat, we said carrying is one of the 39 malachot on Shabbat, carrying from private to public or public to private, or 6 to 8 feet within public itself. If you pick up something in public property and go 6 to 8 feet and then stop, we said these are all prohibitions. And this is most probably one of the most difficult of all the 39 malachot that we're not allowed to do. It's very easy to understand why you can't build on Shabbat. It's one of the malachot. You could understand why you can't write on Shabbat. You can understand that these are called malachot. These are called actions, weaving, planting, plowing, harvesting. These are all malachot. These are all forbidden acts that we're not allowed to do on the holy, cooking on the Shabbat. You can all understand these are considered from the malachot on Shabbat, but you might not realize that carrying from private to public is also considered something, a malacha on Shabbat, something which is forbidden to do on Shabbat. And therefore, perhaps why the Gemara here in Masechta Shabbat, which is one of the top, one of the top few largest Masechtot in the whole Shas, it's up there. It might be number two or number three on the all-time list of how largest tractates. And this it starts with this malacha. It starts with this act of carrying, and perhaps because it needs to highlight this malacha, this particular law is something that people might not even know anything about. A person, maybe logically and on his own would be able to figure out, on his own or on her own, would be able to figure out certain things. You can't. It's a day of rest. You can't have to rest on Shabbat. You would not realize this is also called a malacha. Again, this is given to Moshe at Sinai when Hashem told Moshe on Sinai about what you could do on Shabbat, what you can't do on Shabbat. He told Mr. Shabbat, so he told them this is one of the 39 malachot, is the idea of carrying from private to public. But many places do not meet the Torah requirement of being called public. Like we said, according to Rashi, if you have a small town, a small place, you don't have 600,000 people traveling in that area, traveling that area, that's not called a public place, according to Rashi on a Torah level. However, it resembles a public place, and therefore the rabbi said you cannot carry in such a place unless you do certain things in order to make an eruv to permit you to carry in such a place. So here comes the Gemara now to explain what do we identify as a private place, the public, and it's not going to give all the details here. It's going to give us some broad cases, scenarios. So now the Gemara says, Eizehi Rishut HaYachid. The Gemara says, what is a Rishut HaYachid? Give me an example of a private domain. Now the Gemara is not going to say, what do you mean a private? You want to know a private domain? Your house is a private domain, right? That's a private domain. But the Gemara is going to tell us something novel, something that you might not have realized is considered a public domain. And the Gemara is going to say, if you have a charitz, if somebody goes ahead and digs a ditch, and that ditch is amuk asara, it's 10 tvachim deep. It's around 35 to 40 inches deep, and it's also wide, rachav arba'a, and it's wide, and its width is 4 tvachim, which is around 15 inches by 15 inches. That ditch is considered private property. So if you go ahead, it's not public. The public cannot walk in the ditch, right, Simon? The ditch that's almost 40 inches deep. It has a certain width, so that's a private area. And being that it's a private area, technically, if you would take something from public property and put it down into this ditch, you have now gone from public to private. Or if you take something from this ditch out and you bring it outside, that's called private to public. You will have a big situation. Practical situation would be if you have, let's say, some sort of water underneath. You have a well underneath or a pit of water or something underneath, and now you want to draw from that pit to take the water out and bring it. And if that ditch is 10 deep and 15 inches wide by 15 inches wide, you are taking the water from private to public. You'll have a problem on Shabbat to take water from that ditch out. So we're going to see what they did when they traveled, people, what they did to deal with that situation, how they would close off the area above the ditch, above the ground, in order to make that also a private area. We'll see about that. So that is the case of one of the cases of private property. V'chein gedesh hu gavoa asara v'rochav arba. If you have a fence, let's say a partition that is high 10 tfachim, that is high 40 inches, and it's high 40 inches, and it's also wide. It has a thickness, that wall has a thickness of 4 tvachim, of 15 inches by 15 inches. So that wall will be considered also a private area. And there's a chidush, the novelty is at the top of the wall itself is considered private. If you take something from public property, you put on top of that wall, that's considered private property.
Wait a minute, you're putting a fence, is that on private property, the fence, when you put a fence up?
So let's say you put that fence in public property.
Okay,
That fence in public property, that would not have that fence would be considered a private if it has a certain height and certain width,
Mhm.
and that's a chidush. Now there is an idea. Okay, we're going to continue in the Gemara now. The Gemara says, "Ve'ezehi reshut harabim." What is called a reshut harabim? What makes something a reshut harabim? So the Gemara says, if you have a sratya is a highway. That's one of the translations that goes from city to city. It's a highway that goes from city to city. That's public. Some Rashi in a different tractate translates it means a thoroughfare. He doesn't say that it's referring to a highway that's going from city to city. It's a thoroughfare. That is, the highway is considered public property. Platya Gedola, if you have a large plaza, people, broad streets that are used as marketplaces. So that is, those are also, that's a public area. So that's a large public plaza, or muvaot hamfulashim, or streets that are open at both ends. So streets, you have a city street, and it has a certain width. It's 16 amot wide. Some of the streets, and I think in Mea Sha'arim in Israel, are very narrow. Sometimes you see certain streets that those streets would not technically be the size of a public street. A public street has to have also a certain width to it. It's the first time this is how we're going to see more about that in the Gemara, because here the Gemara doesn't mention that there's a requirement of a width. You have a 16 amot, which is could be 16. It could be anywhere from 24 to 32 feet wide. Now that's not so wide, right? 24 to 32 feet wide. What do you say, Ralph? What's the size of the street here, the side street here on 63rd? How many feet do you think that is, Ralph?
50 feet, maybe?
Maybe, okay. So it would meet the requirements of the width of a public to be called the width of a public street. Now, Rashi in Eruvin says that if you have a walled city, the streets must open at each end to one of the city gates, so that the street goes completely through the city and resembles the way the Jewish people in the desert. The street went from one area all the way to the other area. That's Rashi, what Rashi says. Okay, so now let's, the discussion about streets, if a street is closed at night, so that means it's not completely open. Meaning, sorry, let's say let's say the gates of the city are closed at night. So therefore, it shows you that the streets are it's not a public, it's not, it doesn't go all the way through. I mean, it's enclosed if you're going to say that the streets are closed at night. So, so, many would say that if the streets are closed at night, if the city gates are closed at night, that maybe would lose the status of being a public domain. There is an opinion of the Rajba. The Rajba says that's only if the streets, um, if something, as a result of the thoroughfare that um, people pass, that makes, because when people pass through an area and you say that's called a public area, like we say the highways or these type of things, or the roads that people pass, so for those roads or those places to be considered public, it has to be open at night, those gates of the city. But the Rajba is of the opinion that public plazas, which are public because people hang out there, where people gather, it's not because people are traveling, which is making it so much public. It's people are just hanging out, coming together, assembling there. His opinion is even if the gates are closed, it's considered still a public property. So there's definitely going to be a lot of discussion about, at what point are there certain things that will remove the status of being public, right? Here you have a public area where people travel, but if it's closed at night, the city gates are closed at night, it would seem that it's not considered public. It loses its status on a Torah level of a public property. But if you have a place, a market area, let's say the streets here, or people are gathering in the streets in New York, to do business, and that's what makes it public. They're all coming to be there by the market to buy. So then, even if the gates are closed at night, the city gates are closed. So the Rajba is of the opinion it still be considered public. Others say it won't be considered public. So these are some of the things that whether you're able to make an eruv or not make an eruv, that the rabbis have to be familiar with all the different opinions, what constitutes a public area on a Torah level and what doesn't constitute a public area on a Torah level. Like we said, if it's a Torah area on a Torah, if it's a public area on a Torah level, making the eruv would not be sufficient. Would not be able to make an eruv. But if it does not meet the biblical definition of a public area, small town USA, or if it's a city that has all these little narrow streets that are not a certain amount wide, or other things. Let's say we spoke about just now, if the gates are closed at night of the city, and the only way it's public is because of the traveling of it's used as more of a passing through from city to city. But if the gates are closed, that might not make it a public area. So these are some details in the discussion. So the Zuhi Rishut Rabim Gemura. These are considered a public places. And remember, we are discussing when we say if you have a walled city, we said Rashi and Irvin, if a city that's surrounded by a wall, most of our cities that we deal with today are not surrounded by walls, right? We're not in walled cities. But China maybe is a walled city. What do you say, Adam? China has a nice wall around the China. What is it?
But that's the whole country, like.
Right. But I'm saying, but so there it has a walled city, but if it's open on the ends, if the streets are open, the gates are open, and so that would make it, even though it's a walled city, but like we said, if the gates are open, the streets go, to the gates are open, and you could go from one place. If you want to go from one place to the other, and go through, let's say if you're traveling through, If they close the gates of at night, and therefore it's more of a private place. If they would close the gates at night, if China, let's say the gates of the wall by the wall of China, and they would close the gates at night, so therefore it's not. And let's say you want to make a certain highway considered public, but that's not if they're going to close the gates at night of that walled city, we're saying it will not be considered a public place. It's not open. It's closed at night. It has that wall around it. It's closed at night. So since you're traveling there, you're traveling through, you want to make this public because it's a public highway. But if it's closed at night, therefore it would not be considered the definition of public according to Torah law. But according to the Rashba, that only would remove a highway or a road that goes in China from China to outside China. If that road is closed at night, they don't leave the gate open. They don't open the gate is locked. You can't leave at night. But technically, that would not be called public area. However, the Rashba says, but the marketplace in China, the streets of China, where there are billions of people over there, if I can exaggerate a little bit, that's a public place. Even if they'll lock the gates at China, they'll lock the gates of the walls at night. The Rashba says his opinion is, even if it's locked at night, but the fact that it's public because it's people are hanging out there, people are in the streets, right, Simon? They're all in the streets. They're all hanging out in the streets. The public thoroughfare for people to be in the streets and to gather over there, and that's what's making it public. So now the Gemara says, with that being said, you cannot carry from this. I don't know if I said a proper hello to Asaf. Say hello to Asaf again. You can't carry from this type of private domain that we identified as private. Let's say the ditch that has a certain depth and a certain width. You can't carry from this private area assignment to the public, or from the public area to the private area. And what happens in Hotzi if he went ahead and he did carry from this private area to this public area, right? Morning, Boker Tov. Good, thank you, Baruch Hashem. How are you?
Boker Tov, Rabbi.
Boker Tov. Who do we have the honor of joining
It's
us?
Emmanuel.
Emmanuel, how are you?
Emmanuel.
Wow, that's great.
Tell him I said hello.
Emmanuel, did you hear that hello from Ralph?
Of course, yeah.
Okay, very good. You got a hello, very good. So you got a hello from Ralph and you got a smile from Adam. So you got two on the deal, Emmanuel. Okay, so Amud Siyin, we are now on Vav and Aleph 6a, the last line of 6a2. We just said Amud Siyin you can't carry from this type of private, even this private domain to the public domain. Now in 6a3, you can't bring in, you can't carry from not only from private to public, from public to private. That's called hachnasa, bringing in. Now what happens if a guy went ahead and isn't it understood that you can't carry from private to public automatically? People might not realize, that you can't carry from public to private. It's more obvious that you can't carry from private to public. And if a person went ahead, and carried from public to private or private to public, so the Gemara says the following: B'shogeg, if he did it unintentionally means he did not know it was Shabbat. He forgot it was Shabbat, or not that he forgot it was Shabbat. He knew it was Shabbat, but he didn't know I can't carry. He didn't come to the shir. He didn't come to the class. He didn't know, right? If you don't learn, you don't know. If you want, there's a Gemara there. You got it. Very good. So b'shogeg, if he did it unintentionally, chayev chatat. He has to bring a sin offering. because not knowing is not an excuse. We don't say you're exempt because you don't know something. Then hotzi vechnis, close off the volume over here. If he was hotzi vechnis, if he did it unintentionally, he has to bring a sin offering. He has to bring an offering, a korban, a sacrifice to the Beit HaMikdash. By the way, our prayers, when we pray, it's like bringing every day that they brought a sacrifice for the community morning offering called the Korban Tamid. And in the afternoon, they brought another offering. So when you pray, your prayer is corresponding to that offering, and it's as if you brought the offering. Carrying is the right thing. Carrying is one of the 39 malachot. And because it's not so obvious, we said maybe that's why the tractate of Masechta Shabbat starts with this law, because it's not so obvious. And we got to get the people. We want to make sure the people know the seriousness of this. And look what the Gemara says. Unintentionally, he has to bring a korban chatat, a sin offering. And if intentionally he knew it was Shabbat, and he knew that he can't carry, and he goes ahead and nevertheless he does not listen, and nevertheless he carries. If he's no witnesses, no warning, so the mezid anosh karet. The punishment is karet, which the Rambam says he's cut off from the next world. That's a very serious. There's different types of punishment. There's a punishment called malkut, lashes. Lashes is a lower level punishment compared to karet, being cut off from the next world. And if there's witnesses and there's warning, so he comes the viniska, gets stoning, which is the highest level of punishment. Good morning, Asaf. Of a person, the highest punishment. There's different types of capital punishments found in the Torah, and one of them is to get killed by the sword. That the call, because so obviously we hope the people are carrying only in areas where there is an eruv, and they have to be very careful. And the mezid, if he was warned v'niskal, he gets the highest of the 4 types of capital punishments. This is the most serious capital punishment. There's many ways to skin a cat, so to speak. Oh, bless you. There's many ways to skin a cat. I presume there's certain ways that are more harsher, stronger, and more ways that are not as strong. It's easier for a person to die, most probably to die. It's a lighter capital punishment through a sword than through stones. Just like today, when they do the death penalty in the American courts, right? Maybe they're doing, there was something called an electric chair, right? Now, I doubt they do the electric chair anymore, right?
Lethal injection.
They do an injection. So the injection is a much lighter capital punishment than electric chair. We have a lawyer in the house. Am I correct, Adam? I think it's a right. I would think so, right? Yeah. So I would think that that the electric chair is a more serious type. They both did it. They both get the same result, but one is a stronger punishment than the other. So that's in a certain sense. Now, it's very rare that a person is warned and there's witnesses and he's told, if you do this, the court is going to go ahead and do this punishment, and he does it anyways. I mean, that's a little bit the very foolish type of person who understands the seriousness of what's going on, and nevertheless he goes ahead and he. But again, even if he's a simpleton, so if he doesn't know and he goes ahead and he carries on Shabbat, we said he has to be. The court won't touch him. The guy doesn't know; he's not educated. But then, he has to go bring an offering, a korban. He has to bring a chatat. That simpleton has to know. He has to learn. He has to. You're a Jew, and part of being a Jew, you have responsibilities to learn and to know what you all can do and what you can't do. Person can't say, "I'm a Jew. And I don't need to know I don't have to. I don't have to know anything what I need to do. I don't have to know. I can't eat this. I can't eat. I can do whatever I want. You have responsibilities. Yes, Asaf.
But don't, in the case of corporal punishment, isn't there a warning by two witnesses?
You're right. There is a warning. There is a warning. There's no punish. There's never a punish. There's no punishment that's given by the court. The guy's not. The guy eats not kosher food. The guy eats pork, and that's one of the 613 mitzvot. One of the 365 that you can't do, and the Torah says don't do it. And he does it, but he's not warned. The court, even though he does it intentionally, we will not touch him. The court will not touch a guy if he's not warned. The court's not going to hit the guy. Give a guy lashes, he has to be warned. He has to be forewarned that he can't do this thing. Isn't that beautiful? Isn't that beautiful? Is that great? It's not just
Give him a chance.
right. Now, the Gemara continues. Aval yam ubika. If you have the ocean or a valley, these are not. You have a valley. You have a whole stretch of a lot of fields. These are not places where the public walks. The valley. All these. You have all these fields, but it's not. It's not really a private area. It's very public. All these fields, valley, the ocean is not really private. It's not a private area that one guy had that's private.
Well,
But
the desert.
What'd you say, Ralph?
In the desert.
Right. So these will not be considered. Won't be public in a sense of to meet the Torah's definition of public, because it's not a place that commonly people are traveling and spending that's not where the public spends their time. The public spends their time on the streets, in the marketplace, in the plazas. They're not spending their time. It's not a commonly. It did. Right. So if you go from your house to this, and you carry from your house to the ocean or to this valley, so there is no Torah prohibition, because you went from private, but you did not go to a public property. You went to a non-public property, and does not meet the requirements, and therefore there's no Torah violation, but there is a rabbinic violation, because you can understand that it does resemble, it looks like public property. The ocean looks like a public area. It's not a private beach. It's not. I'm saying. Anyways, we're talking about it's not a public. It doesn't meet the requirements of public. So therefore, but since it resembles public, people will say, if I could carry from my house to this beach, I could carry from my house to the public street. So therefore, the rabbis who are interested in protecting us and making a fence, I'll say you can't carry from your house to this ocean.
What if you have a house on the beach? Your house is facing the beach.
Right. So now that beach is a public. Again, it's not. It will not. If a person would carry from his house to the beach, he didn't violate Torah law. Now you got to get into rabbinic questions of that beach might have a status of a. It seems that the Gemara says it has a status of a rabbinic domain. You can't carry in that area. So I wouldn't be able to carry from my house to the beach rabbinically. If he does it, he has to repent. There's no. So then the question is, there's something called rabbinic lashes. So we would have to see, when do rabbis give rabbinic lashes when a guy is warned. Again, only the rabbis will not give rabbinic lashes called makot mardut, when a person is rebellious against the rabbis. So then now we have to see when those would apply, when they would give it, when they won't give it. It has to be looked into. but there's no Torah lashes, there's no Torah violation. But there's a Gemara that I like to quote, that the Gemara in Brachot says that women are obligated to say Birkat HaMazon. Women have to say Birkat HaMazon. They eat, they're satiated, they have an obligation. And the question, they eat, even if, whatever they had a kazayit, whatever they have obligation, they have an obligation to say Birkat HaMazon. The Gemara says, is it biblical or rabbinic? So the Gemara doesn't conclude at the end, is it rabbinic or rabbinic? There's a question in halacha. But the Gemara says, what's the difference if it's biblical or rabbinic? They gotta say Birkat HaMazon. So the Gemara says the difference will be, can they say it for me, for a man? If they're biblically obligated, then technically they could say it to me, cover me. If they're not biblically obligated, I have a biblical obligation because I ate and I'm full, and if they have a rabbinic obligation cannot cover biblical. But the Gemara's initial response is, what's the difference? You got to do it anyways. So whether it's a place that I can't carry on a Torah level, whether a place I can't carry on a rabbinic level, I have to keep both. But there are differences whether I have to bring a korban, an offering, or not. But whether it comes to in practice, I can't carry in a place that's rabbinically prohibited. The same way I understand I can't carry in a biblical. So the Gemara has a question because Birkat HaMazon, the land of Israel was given according to the men, to the tribes. So the question is, the women only got if there was no men. So we talk about the Aretz, the land of Israel, in the Birkat HaMazon. So, I mean, if there's no sons, then the daughters inherit it. But so that's one thing. So maybe since the Birkat HaMazon, one of the things you have to talk about because it's the land, and since the women were not, it was a portion of given out according to the men, or there's another idea because you have to mention Britcha to talk about the circumcision and Britcha shechatamta b'tzarenu. Women, there's no mitzvah of circumcision on Brit has to do with a man, not a woman. So maybe right, but because like we said, even though it's not a time-bound mitzvah, but since there are certain parts of the Birkat HaMazon that discuss certain issues that might not apply to a woman, circumcision is a key. But if you had bread and you were satiated, right? So because the Gemara has a question, because there's certain things when the Torah tells you to recite the Birkat HaMazon, there are certain parts of the Birkat HaMazon that don't relate to women so much. The circumcision doesn't relate to the women, and about certain things about the land of Israel, about the inheritance. So therefore, that's the question of the Gemara. I want to wish everyone a beautiful day. They have to, but again, the women have to say Birkat HaMazon. They have to say Borei Nefashot. The only question is it rabbinic or biblical? Again, Borei Nefashot al Mich is rabbinic, but Birkat HaMazon, when they're satiated, is the question: is it biblical obligation or rabbinic? Have a great day, everybody.
Thank you, Rabbi.
Thank you all. Thank you for joining. Could you remind me? I forgot your full name. Have a good day, Ralph.
You too, Ralph.